my housewarming, my daughter-in-law's brother announced that my retirement cottage would make the perfect vacation rental. I told him no. 2 weeks later, he returned with contractors and plans to renovate my home. This place is going to be an amazing vacation home. My daughter-in-law's brother Tyler said, swirling his wine glass as he paced across my brand-new cedar deck. He didn't look at the pristine Delaware River flowing peacefully just 50 yards away, nor did he admire the towering pines framing my cozy 2-bedroom retirement cottage. His eyes were locked on the ceiling beams, calculating, measuring, and mentally gutting the sanctuary I had spent 40 years of hard corporate labor to buy outright. I took a slow sip of my sweet tea, keeping my voice incredibly calm. Exactly. And I plan to spend my entire retirement here. Tyler laughed a grating, condescending sound that immediately turned the heads of the other guests at my housewarming barbecue. My name is Beatrice. I am 68 years old, a retired high school registrar, and a widow who finally secured her own slice of heaven after a lifetime of putting everyone else first. This cottage was my dream. It wasn't a mansion, but it was paid for, peaceful, and entirely mine. My son Owen and his wife Clara had helped me unpack boxes all morning. They knew how much this place meant to me. But Clara's parents, Richard and Susan, along with their 30-year-old son Tyler, had arrived late, bringing nothing but unsolicited advice and an air of unearned authority. Tyler was a struggling freelance property scout who lived paycheck to paycheck, yet he carried himself like a real estate mogul. "Oh, come on, Beatrice, be realistic," Tyler continued, leaning against the railing. "Living out here all year round is a waste of prime real estate. With a few cosmetic upgrades, a hot tub on this deck, and some trendy modern furniture, we could list this on short-term rental platforms. We'd pull in $4,000 a month easily during the peak season." I stared at him, my smile fading. "I didn't buy a business, Tyler. I bought a home. But you're just one person. Beatrice, you don't need all this space." Tyler insisted, ignoring my boundary completely as he gestured to the open-concept living room. He pulled out his phone, tapping frantically to show me a spreadsheet he had apparently prepared on the drive over. The sheer audacity of bringing a business pitch to a private housewarming party made my stomach tighten. Clara's parents nodded along approvingly while my son Owen walked over from the grill, his brow furrowing as he sensed the tension building on the deck. "Look at the numbers," Tyler said, thrusting the screen in front of my face. "You sign the management rights over to me. I handle the guests, the cleaning, and the listings. We split the profits 60-40. With your share, you can easily rent a nice, quiet, 1-bedroom apartment closer to the city. You'll have extra cash flowing in, and we get to keep this beautiful place in the family as a vacation getaway for holidays." I didn't look at his phone. I kept my eyes locked on his. "Let me make this incredibly clear, Tyler. I am not renting my home. I am not moving into an apartment. And I am certainly not partnering with you on a business venture." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a sharp, undeniable finality. A few of my close friends from the neighborhood who had joined the barbecue suddenly got very quiet, pretending to be deeply interested in their potato salad. Tyler's face flushed a light shade of red, his smug demeanor faltering for a fraction of a second before he scoffed. "I'm just trying to help you secure your future," he muttered, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "No need to get defensive about a smart financial move." "It's only smart for you, Tyler," I replied, my tone icy. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to check on the cobbler." "My mom is right, Tyler, drop it," Owen said, stepping up onto the deck and placing a protective hand on my shoulder. I felt a swell of pride. My son was a good man, raised with values of respect and boundaries. He looked directly at his brother-in-law with a firm, no-nonsense expression. She worked her entire life for this cottage. She's not turning her sanctuary into a revolving door for tourists just so you can collect a management fee. Respect her decision. Clara stepped up next to Owen, nodding in agreement. Yeah, Ty, seriously. This is Mom's dream home. We talked about this before. It's not an investment property. For a moment, I thought the issue was resolved. I felt supported and validated by the kids. But the peace was short-lived. Richard, Clara's father, set his beer bottle down on the outdoor table with a heavy clink. He cleared his throat, adjusting his polo shirt as he stepped into the circle, his voice carrying the patronizing tone of a man who believed he always knew best. Now, let's not rush to dismiss a good opportunity, Richard said, looking at me with a condescending smile. Beatrice, you should really think about what our son is proposing. The economy is volatile. Having a steady passive income stream during your retirement is far better than having your capital tied up in dead equity. Money in the bank is always better than sentimental brick and mortar. Susan, Clara's mother, chimed in, smoothing her skirt. Richard is right, dear. Tyler has a wonderful eye for these things. It's a win-win. You get to live comfortably in town without worrying about lawn maintenance, and we all get a lovely place to visit on the weekends. It's what families do. If I wanted to live in town, Susan, I would have bought a condo there. I said, my voice remaining steady despite the rising heat in my chest. I looked at the older couple, refusing to let them intimidate me in my own home. My capital is not dead equity. It is invested in my peace of mind. I spent 40 years dealing with crowded schedules, noise, and traffic. I chose this river, these trees, and this quietness. It is not up for negotiation, and it is not a family timeshare. Clara looked uncomfortable, glancing between her parents and me. Mom, Dad, please. It's Beatrice's house. Let's just enjoy the food. But Richard wasn't used to being told no. He shrugged a dismissive gesture that made my blood run cold. We're just trying to look out for you, Beatrice. But if you prefer to be stubborn and leave money on the table, that's your prerogative. Just don't complain when the winter heating bills start piling up and you realize how isolated you are out here. I survived 30 winters in upstate New York, raising a son on a registrar's salary, Richard. I replied, holding his gaze. I think I can manage a heating bill without selling my soul to a rental app. The rest of the evening was incredibly strained. Tyler spent his time whispering to his parents in the corner of the yard, occasionally glancing toward the cottage with a resentful look. When the party finally wrapped up, they left without saying a proper goodbye. Only Owen and Clara stayed behind to help me clean up the kitchen, both of them apologizing profusely for their family's behavior. They just don't know how to mind their own business. Clara sighed, wiping down the granite kitchen counter as the sun began to dip below the tree line. Don't worry about it, Clara, I told her, kissing her cheek. You and Owen have been wonderful. Go home. Get some rest. I'm going to sit by the water and enjoy the quiet. After they left, the silence of the woods wrapped around me like a warm blanket. For the next 2 weeks, my life was bliss. I woke up early, drank coffee on the deck, watched the herons dive into the river, and planted a small herb garden by the kitchen window. I thought the incident at the barbecue was just an annoying blip. I was wrong. On an afternoon, I heard tires crunching on my driveway. I wasn't expecting any deliveries. I walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. My heart sank. Tyler's beat-up SUV was parked near the garage, but he wasn't alone. He climbed out of the driver's seat holding a clipboard, followed by 2 men in bright orange vests carrying tape measures and a digital camera. They walked right onto my property, talking loudly and pointing at the exterior walls of my home. Tyler was gesturing toward my wraparound deck, talking to the men, as if he were a foreman directing a construction crew. A surge of hot anger rushed through my veins. I didn't hesitate. I walked to the front door, threw it open, and stepped out onto the porch, ignoring the light drizzle. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice cutting through the damp afternoon air like a knife. "Hey, Beatrice," Tyler called back, waving his clipboard with a casual, breezy grin that made my fists clench. He walked up the porch steps as if he owned the place, the two men in vests following closely behind. "Sorry to drop in unannounced. This is Dave and Marcus. They're local contractors. I brought them over to take some quick measurements of the deck and the basement crawl space. We need to get some estimates for the hot tub installation and the basement conversion before the winter rush." I stood my ground at the top of the steps, refusing to let them take another step forward. "I told you 2 weeks ago, Tyler. No. You have absolutely no right to bring contractors to my property." Tyler chuckled, leaning against the wooden railing. "Beatrice, don't be like that. I spoke to Clara, and she agrees that you're just being sentimental. Once you see the actual profit projections and how easy the transition will be, you'll thank me. I'm doing all the heavy lifting for you. We're just getting a head start on the paperwork, so we don't lose the autumn booking window." The sheer entitlement of his statement left me breathless for a second. He had bypassed me completely, using my daughter-in-law's name to justify trespassing on my land and planning renovations on a house he had zero legal claim to. "Dave, Marcus," I said, looking past Tyler to the two confused-looking contractors. "I am the sole owner of this property. My name is on the deed. This man has no authority to authorize any work assessments or renovations here. You are currently trespassing on private property." The two men exchanged uncomfortable looks, immediately stepping back off the porch. "Whoa, Beatrice, there's no need to make a scene." Tyler stammered, his face turning bright red as his contractors began retreating toward their truck. "You made the scene the moment you stepped onto my driveway with a clipboard." "Tyler," I said, my voice dead calm, but carrying a dangerous weight. "I want you, your friends, and your vehicle off my property in 60 seconds. If you are still here, I will dial the sheriff's office and report an active trespass." "You wouldn't do that to family." Tyler sneered, his mask of friendly helpfulness completely slipping to reveal the petulant, greedy child underneath. "We're trying to build a family legacy here. You're just being selfish, keeping this whole place to yourself, when it could be supporting the people who actually have to work for a living. This house is my legacy, built on 40 years of my own labor," I replied, pulling my phone from my pocket and unlocking the screen. "And you are not my family. You are my daughter-in-law's brother, and you have exactly 40 seconds left." Tyler glared at me, his eyes filled with pure venom. He realized I wasn't bluffing. He snatched his clipboard, muttered a string of curses, and marched back to his SUV, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. The truck kicked up gravel as it roared down the driveway, disappearing onto the main road. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. I went back inside, locked the door, and immediately called my son. He did what? Owen's voice cracked with disbelief and anger over the speakerphone. Within an hour, Owen and Clara were sitting at my kitchen island. Clara looked incredibly pale, her eyes red from crying on the drive over. She looked at me, her hands trembling as she held a mug of tea. "Mom, I swear to you, I never told him he could do that. He called me last week asking if you liked the house, and I just said yes. She loves it. I never gave him permission to bring people over. I believe you, Clara," I said, gently reaching across the counter to pat her hand. But your brother is using your name to validate his greed. And your parents are enabling him because they want a free vacation home at my expense. This ends today, Owen said, his jaw tight. I'm calling a family dinner. We're going to Clara's parents' house tonight, and we are putting a hard stop to this. You don't have to come, Mom. I'll handle them. No, Owen, I said, standing up straight. It is my house, and it is my boundary. I am coming with you. But we are going to do this professionally, calmly, and without screaming. We are going to give them a lesson in reality. I went to my home office, locked the door, and immediately called my family attorney, outlining exactly what had transpired on my porch. I had spent my entire career managing high school administrative conflicts, but when dealing with entitled adults who acted like spoiled teenagers, a paper trail was the only language they understood. Within 2 hours, my lawyer had drafted and emailed over the official legal notices, which I printed out and placed into a crisp, neat folder. Armed with the paperwork, I joined Owen and Clara in the driveway. We piled into Owen's car and drove toward the suburbs. When we arrived at Richard and Susan's house, Tyler was already there, sitting at the dining table, looking smugly vindicated, clearly having told his version of the story first. Beatrice, Richard said, standing up with a stern look. Tyler told us you threatened to call the police on him. Don't you think that's a bit extreme for a family misunderstanding? He's only trying to help you. I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table and opened my folder, sliding 3 documents across the polished mahogany wood. This isn't a misunderstanding, Richard. This is a legal warning. Tyler scoffed. What is this, a fake restraining order? It's a cease and desist letter drafted by my attorney this afternoon, I said, smoothly. And underneath it is a certified copy of my property deed showing my sole ownership. The 3rd document is a formal trespass warning filed with the county sheriff's department. Tyler, if you, your contractors, or anyone associated with you sets foot past my gravel driveway again, the sheriff will arrest you on sight. No warnings, no phone calls. Susan gasped, clutching her chest. Beatrice, how can you be so cruel? We are supposed to be family. Family respects boundaries. Susan, I replied, looking her dead in the eye. Family doesn't plot to colonize a widow's retirement home. You wanted a business discussion. This is how I do business. You wanted to talk about dead equity. Let's talk about Tyler's credit. If he wants to manage properties so badly, he can apply for a commercial loan and buy his own. Leave mine out of it. The silence in the dining room was absolute. Richard looked at the legal documents, his face turning a deep, embarrassed shade of purple. He knew I had the law, the resources, and the absolute resolve to back up my words. Tyler looked down at his lap, his arrogance completely deflated as he realized his little real estate fantasy had crashed into a concrete wall of legal reality. Owen stepped forward, looking at his in-laws. If any of you ever disrespect my mother or her home again, Clara and I will be taking a very long break from family gatherings. I suggest you apologize. Clara nodded silently, standing firmly by her husband's side. Richard swallowed his pride, giving a stiff, reluctant nod. We apologize, Beatrice. Tyler went too far. It won't happen again. Thank you, I said, closing my folder. I appreciate the apology. Enjoy your evening. We walked out together into the cool evening air. As we drove back, I felt a profound sense of relief. I hadn't been cruel. I had simply drawn a line in the sand with ironclad ink. Now I sit on my cedar deck, watching the golden light of the sunset reflect off the calm waters of the Delaware River. My coffee is hot,
The bruise on my collarbone had turned that ugly shade of yellow-green by the time I finally let myself look at it in the mirror. 3 weeks out, and it still ached when I reached for anything above my head. My doctor said that was normal. Nothing about what happened to me felt normal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. Not the night everything fell apart, but the morning I noticed something was wrong with my bank account. It was a Tuesday in early November. I remember because I had just gotten back from my neighbor's house. She has a little dog named Biscuit, and I sometimes walk him on Tuesday mornings when her hip is acting up. I came in, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table to pay a few bills online. That's when I saw the charge, $472, to a place called Kestrel Home Furnishings. I had never heard of it. I sat there with my coffee going cold, staring at the screen, thinking maybe I'd clicked on something by accident. Then I scrolled down. Another charge, $318. Meridian Spa and Wellness. 2 days earlier, I closed the laptop and opened it again as if the numbers might change. They didn't. Now I want you to understand something about me. I am 64 years old. I taught middle school English for 31 years in Akron, Ohio. I am not a dramatic woman. I don't catastrophize. When something goes wrong, I sit with it, I think it through, and I make a plan. So I did not immediately assume the worst. I called my bank. I reported the charges as unfamiliar. The woman on the phone said she'd flag them for review and send me a new debit card within 5 to 7 business days. I hung up feeling a little better. Then my son called. He and his wife had been living about 25 minutes from me since they got married 3 years ago. My son, I'll call him by what I've always called him, because that's all he is to me now, is 37 years old. He works in logistics for a shipping company. His wife, who I will simply call my daughter-in-law, is 34. She doesn't work, which has never bothered me. What bothered me was other things. Things I told myself weren't worth mentioning. "Hey, Mom," he said when I picked up. "You doing okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just dealing with some weird charges on my account." He paused. Just a half second too long. "Oh yeah? Like what?" "Some store I've never heard of. A spa." I called the bank. "Probably just fraud," he said. "Happens all the time." "Anyway, I was calling because we wanted to see if you're free for Thanksgiving. Lynette wants to host this year." Lynette. That's my daughter-in-law. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I had said yes to everything for 3 years. The new card came. I set up a transaction alert on my phone, something I probably should have done years ago, and I tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. Fraud happens. The bank was handling it. Life went on. Except 3 weeks later, I got another alert. $50 to a nail salon. Then, the next day, $230 to something called Vesper Boutique. Then $112 to an online subscription box service. I stared at my phone in the parking lot of my grocery store and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't random fraud from a data breach somewhere. These charges had a pattern. Small enough individually to seem unremarkable, but consistent. Targeted. Someone wasn't guessing at my card number. Someone knew it. Someone had access. I thought about who had ever handled my card. My son had borrowed it once, maybe 8 months ago, when he said his card was declined at a restaurant, and he was embarrassed in front of some colleagues. He'd handed it back to me that same night. I didn't think anything of it. I trusted him. He was my son. But had he written the number down? Had someone else seen it? I drove home and sat in my driveway for a long time. My son. I kept circling back to my son. And each time I landed there, I felt sick, and I drove my thoughts somewhere else. Because what kind of mother thinks that about her child? The kind of mother who looks at her bank statements, apparently. I went back through 3 months of records. Once I knew what I was looking for, it wasn't hard to find. Small charges, never more than $500, starting about 8 months ago. Around the time he borrowed my card at that restaurant, 16 transactions total, over $4,000. I sat at my kitchen table with the printout in my hands, and I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I called a friend of mine. We've known each other since our kids were in elementary school, and I told her what I'd found. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she said, "You need to talk to him." "I know," I said, "before you do anything else. Before you go back to the bank. Before you talk to anyone else. You talk to your son." She was right. I knew she was right. So I called him and asked if he and Lynette could come over for dinner the Saturday before Thanksgiving. He said sure. Sounded normal. Asked if he should bring anything. I said no. Just come. The week between that call and that Saturday was the longest of my life. I cooked and cleaned and went about my days, and tried not to look at the printout sitting in the drawer of my nightstand. I tried not to replay every conversation we'd had over the past year, looking for signs. I tried not to think about the fact that I had co-signed on their car 2 years ago, or that I'd lent them $3,000 when Lynette said they were short on rent, or that I'd bought groceries for them more times than I could count because she said the month had gotten away from them. I tried very hard not to feel like a fool. Saturday came. I made a pot roast because it was my son's favorite since he was a little boy. I set the table nicely. I told myself, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe Lynette got hold of the number somehow and he's completely in the dark. I wanted so badly to believe that. They arrived a little after 6. Lynette came in first, wearing a new coat I hadn't seen before, dark green with big brass buttons. She kissed my cheek and said the house smelled wonderful. My son hugged me and asked if I needed help with anything. I said no, sit down, dinner's almost ready. We ate, we talked. The weather, a movie they'd seen, his mother-in-law's health, normal, easy. I watched Lynette refill her wine glass twice and laugh at something on her phone while my son talked about a project at work. And then I cleared the plates, came back to the table, set down the bank printout and said, I need to talk to you about this. The silence was immediate and specific, not the silence of confusion, the silence of recognition. My son looked at the paper. His jaw tightened. He didn't ask what it was. Lynette picked up her wine glass. There have been over $4,000 in charges on my debit card over the past 8 months, I said. I didn't make any of them. I needed to understand how that happened. My son didn't look at me. He looked at the table. Honey, I said, and my voice broke a little on that word, which I hadn't expected. I need you to tell me the truth. Lynette set down her glass. We were going to pay you back. I looked at her. I'm sorry, it was temporary. Her voice was even almost bored. We were in a tight spot. We were going to pay it back. I turned to my son. He was still looking at the table. Did you know about this? He finally raised his eyes. Mom, we needed help. You have money sitting there. That's my money, I said. That's my retirement. It wasn't that much. It was $4,000. Over 8 months. Without asking me, I could hear my own voice, very controlled, very quiet, the way I used to talk to a classroom when things had gone seriously sideways. You took money from my account without my knowledge or permission. That is theft. That word, theft, landed hard. I saw it on my son's face. I saw something else there too, something I didn't have a name for. Lynette stood up. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. You absolutely do, I said. Sit down. She didn't sit down. She put on her coat, that new green coat with the brass buttons, and picked up her bag. My son stood too, and something shifted in him then. Some line crossed that I don't think either of us fully understood in the moment. Mom, he said, you need to calm down. I am calm. You're making accusations. I'm reading bank statements. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Then explain it to me. Explain to me why, instead of calling and asking your mother for help, your wife used my card number to buy spa treatments and boutique clothes. Lynette made a sound. Something contemptuous, sharp. You've never liked me, she said. This is about that. This has always been about that. This is about $4,000. Everything is always about money with you. Stop, my son's voice, loud. Louder than I'd heard him in years. He was looking at me, and something in his face had changed entirely. Just stop, Mom. Stop pushing. I haven't moved from this chair. He stepped toward me. Later, when I tried to explain it to people, I struggled with the word for what happened next. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't what you'd see in a movie. It was a push. 2 hands flat against my shoulders, but it was forceful, and I wasn't expecting it. And I am 64 years old, and I don't weigh much anymore, and I went down. My shoulder hit the corner of the table on the way. That's where the bruise came from. I was on the floor of my own dining room. I looked up at my son. He was standing over me, breathing hard. His face had gone white. Lynette was already at the front door. Come on, she said to him. He looked at me one more moment, and then he turned and walked out. I heard the door close. I heard the car start. I heard them pull away. I lay there for a while. Not because I couldn't get up. I could eventually. But because getting up felt like the hardest thing I had ever been asked to do. My shoulder was throbbing. The pot roast was still on the stove. The bank printout was on the table above me, and I could see the edge of it from where I was lying. I thought about my son as a little boy, the way he used to run to me when he fell off his bike, the way he smelled like outside and grass and something sweet that I can't describe but that I have never forgotten. I thought, where did that boy go? Then I picked myself up off the floor, went to the freezer for an ice pack, and called my friend. She was there in 15 minutes. She took one look at my shoulder and said we were going to the urgent care. I didn't argue. On the way, I told her everything. She drove with both hands on the wheel and didn't say a word until we pulled into the parking lot. Then she said, "You're pressing charges." I said, "I know." The urgent care confirmed a bruised clavicle. The doctor asked me very gently how it had happened, the way doctors do when they suspect the answer. I told her. She documented everything. 2 days later, my son called. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while I was making oatmeal. I looked at his name on the screen for a long moment. Then I picked up, "Mom." His voice was different, softer. "I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." I set down my spoon. "I've been thinking," he said, "and I think things got out of hand the other night. I think everybody said things." "I didn't say anything," I said. "I read a bank statement." A pause. "I know things are tense right now, but Lynette and we're in a really hard place financially. And are you calling to apologize?" Silence. "I need to know," I said, "if you are calling to apologize for putting your hands on me and knocking me to the floor, because that's what happened. And that's what I need to hear you address." More silence. And then, so quietly I almost missed it, "You provoked her." I stood very still in my kitchen. The oatmeal was bubbling on the stove. I turned it off. "Is that your answer?" I asked. He didn't say anything else. "All right," I said. "Thank you for calling." And I hung up. I called my attorney that afternoon. She had helped me with my husband's estate when he passed 6 years ago, and I trusted her completely. I told her everything. She told me I had a strong civil case for the financial fraud, and that the physical assault, combined with the medical documentation, gave me options on the criminal side as well. She advised me to file a police report immediately, which I did. The detective I spoke with was a woman about my daughter-in-law's age. She was professional and unhurried and wrote everything down, without making me feel like I was wasting her time. When I finished, she said, "I want you to know what you're describing, the financial exploitation, the assault. This is something we take seriously." I nodded. I had been holding myself together all day, and something about those words, "This is something we take seriously," came very close to undoing me. I kept it together. I thanked her and went home. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt wrong. My son didn't call again. I didn't call him. I worked with my attorney on the civil side, pulling together every record, the bank statements, the transaction dates, the amounts, the merchants. My bank was cooperative once we explained the situation. They identified the transactions as unauthorized use and began their own fraud investigation. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with my friend and her family. Her youngest daughter made the worst green bean casserole I have ever eaten in my life, and I had 2 helpings and told her it was delicious. And I meant every word of it, because I was sitting at a table where I was safe and loved, and no one had any claim on me that they hadn't earned. The criminal case moved slowly, the way these things do. My attorney kept me updated. My daughter-in-law's attorney reached out about a potential settlement on the civil side, which I found almost amusing. The idea that they thought we were still at the negotiating stage. We weren't. What I kept coming back to in the quiet of those months was the question of when it had started. Not the theft, I knew roughly when that had started, but the other thing. The slow erosion of my son into someone who could stand in my dining room and push his mother to the floor and walk out. I thought about the $3,000 I'd lent them. I thought about the co-signed car loan. I thought about every grocery run, every birthday check, every time I'd said yes without hesitation because he was my child, and that's what you do, I thought. Maybe that's exactly why. Because it had never cost him anything. I had made it easy for him to take from me. Not just Lynette, him too. I had trained him without meaning to see my resources as available, to see me as available. That was the hardest part to sit with, not the anger, the guilt, the sense that I had participated somehow in building the person who knocked me down. But then I'd look at my shoulder in the mirror and I'd remind myself, I did not make that choice for him. Whatever I gave freely, I gave. Whatever he chose to take, that was his. The civil case settled in February. I won't give you the exact number, but it covered what was taken and then some. My attorney was pleased. I was something beyond pleased, relieved, maybe, lighter. The criminal case concluded in March. My son pled guilty to 1 count of assault. My daughter-in-law pled guilty to 1 count of theft by deception. The sentencing hearing was on a Thursday morning. I sat in the courtroom in a navy blue blazer that I'd bought with some of the settlement money, and I listened to the judge speak. My son received 18 months of probation, mandatory, counseling, and community service. My daughter-in-law received probation as well, 2 years, along with restitution already covered by the civil settlement. No jail time. The attorneys had been clear that this was the likely outcome for first offenses, and I had made my peace with it. What I wanted wasn't incarceration. What I wanted was accountability, a record. The formal acknowledgement by a court of law that what they had done was wrong. I got that. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse into a cold March morning and stood on the steps for a moment, just breathing. My attorney was beside me. My friend had taken the day off work to be there. "How do you feel?" my friend asked. I thought about it honestly, the way I've tried to do throughout all of this. Not the answer that sounds right, the true answer. "Like myself," I said, "like I've been away for a while and I just got back." She squeezed my arm. We went to breakfast. I had eggs and toast and terrible diner coffee, and it was one of the best meals of my life. My son has not contacted me since the sentencing. I don't know if he will. I've thought about what I would say if he did. Not revenge, not "I told you so," not even the speech I rehearsed 100 times in my kitchen those first few months. I think I would just listen, see who showed up, see if the boy I remember is anywhere in there. But I'm not waiting. I've stopped waiting. I planted tomatoes in my garden this spring for the first time in years. My husband used to tend them, and after he died, I couldn't bring myself to do it. But this year I did. I go out every morning with my coffee and check on them, and they're doing fine. Better than fine. They just needed someone to pay attention. I know that's a small thing. I know it might sound strange, as a note to end on, after everything I've just told you. But sometimes the small things are how you know you've come back to yourself. The tomatoes are coming in beautifully, and I am still here.